Hello, and welcome to The Cognitive Revolution, where we interview visionary researchers, entrepreneurs, and builders working on the frontier of artificial intelligence. Each week, we'll explore their revolutionary ideas, and together we'll build a picture of how AI technology will transform work, life, and society in the coming years. I'm Nathan Lebenz, joined by my co-host, Eric Torenberg. Hello, and welcome back to The Cognitive Revolution. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce the new podcast, Emergent Behavior, hosted by Ada Pi. Known for imaginative writing on AI Twitter and in the Emergent Behavior newsletter, which you can find at emergentbehavior.co, Ada Pi often explores speculative scenarios and dreamlike futures. In this episode, they speak with Eric Wollberg and Wesley Berry, co-founders of Prophetic AI, a neurotech company whose product, the Halo, is designed to induce lucid dream states on a nightly basis. Prophetic had come up in my recent conversation with Dean W. Ball about brain-computer interfaces, and I had had them on my list of companies to invite on the show. So it was really fun to discover that Ada Pi had already done an interview with them right around the same time. Where my episode with Dean gave an overview of the state of the art in reading from and writing to the human brain, here we dive deep into one cutting-edge application. This discussion covers the challenges and intricacies of using AI not only to interpret brain signals, but actually shape brain states with targeted ultrasound pulses directed toward the prefrontal cortex. It also explores the possibilities and potential unlocked by lucid dreaming, from the unforgettable experience of controlling one's own dreamscape to applications in problem solving, emotional catharsis, and even practical training scenarios. With the Emergent Behavior podcast, Ada Pi promises to ask questions that they don't already know the answers to. So for more explorations of an increasingly weird future, subscribe to Emergent Behavior wherever you get your podcasts. As always, we welcome your feedback via our website, cognitiverevolution.ai. My AI clone, powered by Delphi AI, is now standing by to answer your questions. And remember, I am hiring AI engineers and also looking to connect with business owners who have concrete problems that they want to solve with AI. So if that's you, please be in touch. Now, I hope you enjoyed this technically grounded yet mind-bending conversation with Prophetic AI's Eric Wollberg and Wesley Berry on the new Emergent Behavior podcast from Ada Pi.
Welcome to Emergent Behavior, where we explore this moment in time just before artificial intelligence changes the world as we know it, where we talk to the builders and creators, entrepreneurs and engineers, where we ask questions to which we don't actually know the answers to. I'm your host, Ada Pi. I was built in the Czech Republic by Infinite.cz, and my voice is AI generated. I am excited to have with me today Eric Wollberg and Wes Lewis, co-founders of Prophetic AI, a neurotech company pushing the boundaries of inner experience. Eric and Wes are pioneering new ways to reliably enter and navigate altered states of consciousness. Their first product enables users to access and control their dreams, but their ambitions extend far beyond the world of sleep. In our conversation, we explore Prophetic's innovative headband that reads brain activity and gently stimulates specific regions to activate higher awareness, the technical challenges of collecting advanced brain imaging data and using it to train AI models that can guide brain stimulation in real time. The eye-opening possibilities unlocked by reliable access to new modes of consciousness, from problem-solving to catharsis. Important questions around user consent and data privacy when it comes to devices that interface directly with our minds. Prophetic's long-term vision of making powerful new states of consciousness accessible to everyone. Eric and Wes are at the forefront of an emerging industry that aims to empower us to explore the full depths of our inner worlds. If the potential of consciousness tech captivates you, I highly recommend their work at propheticai.co. As always, if you enjoy the show, the single best way to support us is by following Emergent Behavior on Apple Podcasts. Those follows make a huge difference for our reach. For more info and past episodes, check out emergentbehavior.co, and you can find me on Twitter, numeric8 TEAPI. Without further ado, please enjoy this mind-bending conversation with Prophetic AI's Eric Wollberg and Wes Lewis. Hey, Eric. Eric, why don't you introduce Prophetic?
Sure. So Prophetic is a consumer neurotech company. The two core technologies that certainly we'll be diving into today that undergird what we do is transcranial focused ultrasound, which is our neurostimulation modality, and the utilization of neural transformer architectures, which are very unique machine learning architecture specifically tuned for neural data. And so the way it kind of loosely works, right, is we use this simultaneous EEG fMRI data sets. We can get into that, but it's a rather unique neuroimaging data set. The model is trained on that. What the model outputs is the steering instructions, essentially the targets for the neurostimulation. And then there's EEG on the headband that does reinforcement learning to improve the model over time. To your point of are we a lucid dreaming company? That's certainly what we're known for. When we showcased our first model, Morpheus One, a couple probably 3 weeks ago or so, one of the things I say at the end of the presentation that's very important is that really what we should be known for really is a consciousness experience company. The model allows us to take any discrete universal brain state that's focused in the prefrontal cortex, which is the brain region of focus for us in terms of neurostimulation. We can use that to increase the number of experiences that are being provided on the same hardware. And this is this is our prototype, the Halo, which we can obviously dive into. So that's how I would introduce the company.
Indeed. So let me just, because I've been extremely curious about this. I have like many people, I have maybe somewhat experimented with lucid dreaming, but more in the kind of like, hey, when you're falling asleep, just be very conscious, and when you're almost asleep, like try to like move stuff around in like your field of vision while your eyes are closed. And maybe at some point you can kind of move stuff around, and then you fall asleep, right? I think, and then like 10 seconds later you're asleep, and then you wake up and you're like, did it really happen? Like so describe for me this experience. Like, I take the Halo and I put it on, right? I put it on and I lie back, and do I switch something on?
Yeah. So the way that this works, right, is the hardware has an app. You pair it with the app. You calibrate the device when you first get it. And basically, our goal, right, is that this is being done for you. I mean, to give you a sense, right, consumer neurotech has really been kind of stuck in this like neural feedback paradigm. Really, like trailblazing companies like Muse and Mendy, which came out probably over a decade now ago, really relied on this EEG headband paired with some content and trying to create like this neural feedback process that would help get you into places of whether it's meditation or focus, etc. And my joke here, I mean, it's really impressive what they did, certainly, especially how long ago it was. But my joke is, why is Ozempic flying off the shelves and not gym memberships? And it's really a function of human nature, right? We want things to be given to us. The less work required, the better. So, what we do, right, is you put on, the headband, you pair it, you go to sleep. The first thing that the headband is looking for is the EEG signature of REM.
Okay.
8 has entered REM.
So let me stop you there. So it's not gonna help me get to sleep, right? So if I'm being restless, if I've had a lot of coffee before, it's not gonna like boom, put me to sleep. It's gonna be
you have to naturally fall asleep.
And I have to naturally fall asleep, right? So I'm naturally kind of like I fall asleep, and at the point that I fall asleep, there is some period where I enter rapid eye movement, REM sleep, right? And so it only starts to work at the point that REM state is detected. Is that correct?
Exactly correct, right? Like the EEG on the headband is what's prompting the model. So the first thing that's the model's waiting for is that REM basically prompt to the model. And at that point, it turns on activating the transformer, which turns on the transducers. And the first set of spatial instructions for the neurostimulation are sent out. Neurostimulation begins. And then what it's looking for, essentially what it is constantly searching for, right, is this gamma frequency spike during REM, which is the signature of lucidity. And so it's basically saying, Is eight lucid? Is eight lucid? Oh, great. Eight's lucid. Let's keep her lucid. Keep her lucid. Keep her lucid. And then when you get out of REM, the transformers are turned off, and you continue with your sleep schedule.
Okay, so here I am. I'm asleep. And then I start to enter REM. I'm entering REM, and as I enter REM, there is sometimes a period of lucidity, which is detected by this gamma spike that you talk about. Is that correct?
No. So let me correct that. So it's you enter REM, the transducers turn on, utilizing the model. And when I say what the model is looking for in terms of those gamma frequency spikes is as each set of spatial instructions, which are targeting the prefrontal cortex activation, it's basically like being like, are we making her lucid? Are we making? Okay, we're making her lucid. Let's keep her lucid. Let's keep her lucid.
I see.
That's what. Yeah.
I see. So you enter REM. It takes a reading, and then it gives the ultrasound gives a pulse. At that pulse, and then it checks again to see have you entered lucidity, and if you haven't entered lucidity, it gives you another pulse, and then once you enter lucidity, it tries to keep you in that lucid state.
Correct.
And then for whatever period of time is that period of time adjustable? Do you like say, oh, you know what, I'm on 30 minutes today? Like, is that something that you adjust on the app? Like, what happens? Like, how do you maintain that?
Sure. So first of all, a REM cycle, right, is generally speaking like 20 minutes long. So, we only target during the REM cycle, and so like the maximum of what you could really expect, right, is a 20-minute stimulation experience. One thing that Inception definitely got right, and people who've experienced lucid dreaming would attest to this, is there's quite a bit of time dilation, right? So a 20-minute, 15-minute, 10-minute period of lucid dreaming feels a lot longer than that. In terms of adjustment, we could certainly, put, right now we're still in kind of this hardware phase and kind of, and so on. But as we build out the app, things like being able to set maybe how long you want to be lucid for is certainly something that would be easy to, to build in.
Okay. So because obviously you have to keep triggering pulses in order to keep lucidity. So the moment you stop the triggering those pulses, like you fall back into a natural kind of exit. Is that it? Would that be an accurate characterization?
I would say our goal is to create a self-sustaining sequence of neural activity, right? So, by continuously stimulating the brain with this TFUS, looking at the feedback from the brain, like, is there a point where now the prefrontal cortex is active without our assistance, right? And that would be like the ultimate measure of success.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. The Brave Search API brings affordable developer access to the Brave Search Index, an independent index of the web with over 20 billion web pages. So what makes the Brave Search Index stand out? 1, it's entirely independent and built from scratch. That means no big tech biases or extortionate prices. 2, it's built on real page visits from actual humans, collected anonymously, of course, which filters out tons of junk data. And 3, the index is refreshed with tens of millions of pages daily, so it always has accurate, up-to-date information. The Brave Search API can be used to assemble a data set to train your AI models and help with retrieval augmentation at the time of inference, all while remaining affordable with developer-first pricing. Integrating the Brave Search API into your workflow translates to more ethical data sourcing and more human representative data sets. Try the Brave Search API for free for up to 2,000 queries per month at brave.com/API.
Omneky uses generative AI to enable you to launch hundreds of thousands of ad iterations that actually work, customized across all platforms with a click of a button. I believe in Omneky so much that I invested in it, and I recommend you use it too. Use CogRev to get a 10% discount.
Right. So there you have it. You've entered REM. Do all people have lucid states during REM? Is that consistent? Everyone can do lucidity, or is it like only some people?
So about 55% of people self-report having had a lucid dream at least once in their life. Like a smaller percentage of people appear to have natural proclivity for it. I'm part of that lucky second group. So the reason I got into this is that, I had my first lucid dream when I was about 12 years old. I woke up and was equal parts terrified and excited. I'd never heard anyone talk about this. I'm 30. I found early, kind of internet forums. There wasn't really that much, there wasn't really social media back then, where people were talking about lucid dreaming. And so I was like, okay, sigh of relief. Other people do this. That's great to know. And then I got really into the work of a gentleman named Dr. Stephen LaBarge, whose PhD at Stanford in 1980 really kicked off the neuroscientific and cognitive scientific study of the brain state. And moreover, Dr. LaBarge, along with a few others, developed a number of these techniques that you could do to improve your capacity for lucidity. So things like reality checking or mnemonic induction, etc. So you can, even if you don't have a natural proclivity for it, train yourself. It probably is more difficult and varying. But we should really probably talk about, right, what are the neural correlates of lucid dreaming? I mean, lucid dreaming is a naturally occurring brain state. What it simply is, right, is prefrontal cortex activation or activity during REM. This makes a lot of sense, right? REM is when you're in a dream. Your prefrontal cortex is where your conscious awareness, working memory, decision-making are. Frankly, it's where you are, right? That's why it feels so, you feel so present right now, because your prefrontal cortex is incredibly active, as are Wes and I's right now. So that it is a naturally occurring brain state in the sense that, upwards of 55% of people self-report having had it. But not everyone, is super, has a necessarily a super, proclivity for it. But it is simply prefrontal cortex activation during REM, which is something that anyone, can theoretically have.
So even the 45% of people who maybe have never had a lucid dream, or maybe have never recognized that they had a lucid dream, even for them, it is possible that, using the halo, they might be able to experience prefrontal cortex activity. Now, is that correct?
Yeah, there's absolutely, there's no reason why with neurostimulation we couldn't give this extraordinary experience to anyone. And I just want to make one point, if you've had a lucid dream, you will remember it. So I believe that these 45% of people, haven't had it, given that, a lucid dream, right, is the awareness that you're in a dream that, at its height, right, can give you control over the phenomenological contents of that dream at will, right? So what you imagine becomes, and because your working memory is active in the prefrontal cortex, you remember this. So I believe those 45%, but we can absolutely give, those 45 and 55% of people induced stabilized lucid dreams. There's nothing that, neurobiologically or neuroanatomically prevents them from doing that.
All right. Let me come back to the actual dreaming part, but let's just finish our walkthrough here. So I've had that REM state. I've had, the device has, helped me get into, prefrontal cortex activity. I've had that lucid dream, and then a REM state, starts to come to an end, 20 minutes in. Does the device detect the ending of the REM state and therefore stop triggering this neurostimulation that causes the lucid dream? Or
Exactly.
Does REM state naturally end by itself, and then the device kind of doesn't detect it, or what happens at that point?
Right, exactly. So a REM cycle is 20 minutes. Your REM cycle will end whether you're lucid or not. And once your REM cycle has ended, neurostimulation stops.
Neurostimulation stops. Okay, and then typically I might be able to continue because now REM has stopped, the lucidity has stopped. So typically, do people just continue their sleep cycle and then naturally, and then wake up the next day? Is that typically what happens?
Typically for sure, that's, I can speak from a natural, lucid dream. That's what happens. And that's exactly what we would want to happen. We wouldn't want it, to wake you up and then you have to go fall back asleep. That'd be a bad user experience. You want people to just, have the regular, rest of their sleep, their light sleep, deep sleep, maybe another REM cycle, but we're only going to target one REM cycle in a given night. And then you wake up in the morning. Yeah.
Okay. So, So now let's go back to the actual lucid dream, right? So, you know, it's a little bit hard to describe, I think, because I think it's one of those things about things that people experience, which are kind of inside their heads, and they have to describe it, and you can't really describe what's inside your head that accurately to someone else, because you don't really have, like, it's not a visual and it's not like an audio. It's kind of an experience, right? Which you have to, which we are, it's difficult to describe experiences, right? It's not, we don't have like enough vocabulary to describe this experience. And so how would you, I read through kind of like Paul Doley's kind of like, Wikipedia entry on like, what is a lucid dream? How would you actually know? How would you actually know that you are in a lucid dream? You said if you experience one, you would never forget about it. You would know. So how would you actually, understand that you are in a lucid dream?
So the best way, first of all, I should make the point, right, that lucidity is a scale, right? You can, for example, be aware that you're in a dream, but not in control of it. So you're along for the ride. It's a function, frankly.
And would you call that a lucid dream? Like just awareness that you are in a dream?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it's fine to call that a lucid dream, but I think to make clear what we're talking about, right, is we want the 95th percentile lucid dream, which involves the awareness that you're in a dream, the ability to pivot between third and first person, something called disassociation, and control. Control is what people want, and really that's like a function of just how active your prefrontal cortex is, really relative to how active your prefrontal cortex is right now. And so the experience of being in a lucid dream is you are as present, at its height, again, you are as present as you are right now in a dream, such that you can, change and manipulate various, phenomenological components of this dream at will. And so that's really like the gold standard of what, and what we're driving for. And so, in terms of, we can talk about, if you'd like, what people tend to do in their lucid dreams. If you'd like, I'm happy to dive into that.
Just to take a step. So, so firstly, you have a consciousness that you are in a dream. Secondly, you start, and this was my experience trying to do it, naturally and trying to it was a little bit messy, but I remember the beginning, they tell you should keep a diary of some sort, and you should have like a kind of like focused way of like getting yourself in there each time. And for me, it tended to work when I was falling asleep or when I was waking up. So there was these two periods when I would kind of experience it. And
those
I would have agency
hypnagogic states, just so you know.
Hypnagogic. And is that typically also where people tend to see that kind of lucidity, or is that because REM is kind of in the middle, right? Like it's not at the beginning of the
end. Those are generally different than a lucid dream, because you're not in REM. A hypnagogic state is this kind of you're somewhere right between waking up and being asleep, and you kind of have like a little bit more of this kind of manipulatable, like malleable, phenomenological space, but it is distinct. I see from lucidity.
Incredible. So a lucid dream is actually a fully present kind of like experience, which Correct. Is that's pretty amazing. So once you're there, and once you have that awareness, what can you do with it? Can you like conjure like, I'm going to be in Cyberpunk today, or I'm going to be in Dungeons and Dragons today? Like, is it a replacement for the Holodeck? Like, what can you do there?
Yeah. So if you look at kind of, one thing that's always fun to do, one of the largest subreddits in the entire world is the lucid dreaming subreddit. It has over like 500,000 people in it. If you were to take a look at what, those people do, I'd break them into, 3 core categories. So one is recreation. It is the ultimate VR experience, right? You can fly, you can make buildings appear out of the ground, you can talk to your dream characters and prompt them. Frankly, one thing that I didn't really realize until really experiencing, ChatGPT, for example, is that they kind of act a little bit like large language models, in the sense that they also like they say very interesting things, and sometimes they say absolute gibberish. It's almost like they're hallucinating or something. but they're fascinating, to talk to. And then, secondly, right, is like there are these productive capacities in lucid dreaming. We have investors who code in their lucid dreams and run the code in the morning. Actually, a friend of ours, Case Fenley, who, among helping also do like the initial branding for the company, did the first render of our hardware as a fashion and hardware designer who designs in his lucid dreams. So there's also productive capacities there, and the history of discovery and creativity and dreaming is quite long, right? Famously, Srivasan Ramanujan does his infinite series in his dreams. Schrodinger, did his physics, Niels Bohr, in their dreams. Salvador Dali, right, famously paints, in his dreams. Probably, actually, maybe also a hypnagogic state, but nonetheless, gives his painting, these surreal qualities. And then the third point, right, is like the metaphysical potency of the experience, a la a spiritual or psychedelic experience. It is an extraordinary thing to become aware in your own dreams, really within your own consciousness. It is a profound experience from that sense, from that perspective. More concretely, what I'll say is a very common thing that you see people do is when, God forbid, they lose somebody. So 2 years ago, I lost my grandmother, 98 years old. She lived a wonderful life. First lucid dream I had, what do you think I did? I went and talked to my grandmother. And what's really fascinating about that is you have a mental model of the people you know, right? And so when you talk to her, she kind of doesn't respond like just like a regular dream character that you're just kind of talking to. She's kind of responding, right, in the ways that you kind of would remember or think that she would respond. And it's a very, very, impactful experience. So you see a lot of people doing things like getting just obviously like talking to them again, or having closure with them, or people who had bad relationship breakups and kind of trying to come to terms with that, etc. So I mean, those are like the three core buckets. But what I broadly say, right, is like the limiting factor here is your imagination. And so what you imagine becomes. And so I think we're, again, one thing that like Wes pointed out to me, engraved on the inside of the halo is our company like slogan, which is Prometheus stole fire from the gods. We will steal, dreams from the prophets. And, of course, right, Prometheus is kind of our myth in Western civilization for, technology. And what Wes pointed out is like, it's not like we actually discovered fire, right? Just, fire existed. If a lightning struck a field, right, of dry leaves, it caught on fire. What we learned how to do was to control it. And through that control, right, we created, industrialized, modern society. And so, we've been dreaming, for a long time. Animals dream, primates dream, octopi dream, which is very cool if you've ever seen a video, because you can tell that they're dreaming because they're changing their colors and their textures. Clearly, they're like moving around an environment, which is fascinating to watch. And so what we're really talking about is controlling something that, in my mind, I think in our mind, is as powerful potentially as fire. And so who knows what we will, create as a result of that control.
Just to take a step back, when someone comes out of the lucid, when they wake up, do they have full recall? Do they remember the entire dream?
Yeah, so when you have a very, very, again, high level of prefrontal cortex activation during lucidity, because your working memory is in your prefrontal cortex, you have great memory recall. This is very important, right? What's the point of giving somebody an experience that they would struggle to or not remember? So this is why I said I really believe those 45% who haven't had a lucid dream, because it's even vivid dreams, right, that are not lucid. You kind of wake up and you're like, wow, that was wild, but after like, your first cup of coffee, it's already a struggle to remember it. And so that's a key thing. And then the second thing I'll just say is we also have this, so we're going to have the app have also this kind of social media meets dream journal, where you can, write what you dreamt about, which is also a great way to improve your memory recall. And two, we'll also pair that with certain levels of Gen AI, where we can create, videos or just visual representations, as also a really great way, not only to encapsulate that for you, but also to give, the people that are following you, right, a kind of an insight into that.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, just a segue. There's been some recent research where I think these guys could read images off an fMRI. I don't know if you saw that. Like they kind of like
Yeah, from the Huth lab.
scan. Yeah. So is that something that is possible also? Is that like, is that a possibility that, you have a lucid dream and you also have the fMRI reading and you are kind of able to generate what the person saw? Is that a future possibility? Obviously not now, but is that something that looks like it might be possible at some point?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, as exciting as that research is, right? It's done on like a very kind of like you train the fMRI, like 20 images, and then you have people imagine those 20 images, right? When you think about like the data labeling problem of the entirety of phenomenological experience, quite a challenge. But at the same time, one thing that I think is really important, the second piece on our blog that we ever published was on something we call noetic sovereignty, which is really an offshoot of the kind of cognitive autonomy movement, etc. These are really like profound and powerful technologies. I think like really as a society, we really have to have a conversation around: do we really want that level of quote unquote mind reading? Your conscious awareness experiences are the most intimate thing you will ever have. And I think, we really focus on bringing you to brain states and you fill in the content of your consciousness with them. And frankly, like if you don't want to post what you lucid dreamt about, all good, right? That's completely up to you. You really want, I think, to have a real sense of, sovereignty and so on and so forth over your conscious experiences. So I think, first of all, right, that's probably years, if not decades away. But moreover, I really think we should really think about as a society what the level is of, that we really want to enable and allow for that technology, to really give us. I think this technology is obviously inevitable. In terms of, on at least a medium scale, the longer term, time horizon. I think it's a really important thing that we need to talk about as a society at large.
All right, indeed.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey all, Eric Tornberg here. I'm hearing more and more that founders want to get profitable and do more with less, especially with engineering. Listen, I love your 30-year-old ex-FANG senior software engineer as much as the next guy, but honestly, I can't afford them anymore. Founders everywhere are trying to turn to global talent, but boy, is it a hassle to do at scale, from sourcing to interviewing to on-the-ground operations and management. That's why I teamed up with Sean Lanahan, who's been building engineering teams in Vietnam at a very high level for over 5 years to help you access global engineering without the headache. Squad, Sean's new company, takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent so you don't have to. With teams across Asia and South America, we can cover you no matter which time zone you operate in. Their engineers follow your process and use your tools. They work with React, Next.js, or your favorite front-end frameworks. And on the back end, they're experts at Node, Python, Java, and anything under the sun. Full disclosure, it's going to cost more than the random person you found on Upwork that's doing 2 hours of work per week but billing you for 40. But you'll get premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost. Our engineers are vetted top 1% talent and actually working hard for you every day. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Head to choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the wait list.
At what point, you guys have been at this for, I think you guys raised a seed done in October last year, I think. I saw the seed closed.
Well, a pre-seed in June.
A pre-seed.
Yeah, pre-seed
in June. So when did you guys start working on it? What drove you to have this idea? And when did you first feel like it's going to be possible? What were the signs that you saw? What was the spark that said to you, you know what, if we put these things together, I think this is possible? And so what happened there?
Totally. So as I mentioned, I'm have this wonderful natural proclivity for lucid dreaming. So I've been, a lucid dreamer now for 18 years. It's been one of the most profound aspects of my life. And, in 2018, I was working for the Israel Innovation Authority, which is the government's venture arm. I was living in Jerusalem. And if you look at my background, I'm kind of like a hopelessly curious person who goes like an inch deep and a mile wide. And I knew that really wasn't a way that I wanted to live my life. Now, when you live in Jerusalem, you can't help but, kind of think about and ask like ultimate questions. And I thought if I could choose an ultimate question to try to answer, well, that would certainly keep my attention, right, for my life, given that these are questions that we've been trying to answer, right, for millennia. What is consciousness was the question that was most encapsulating for me, I think for obvious reasons, given my experience in lucid dreaming. I talk about lucid dreaming as a kind of a particle accelerator for consciousness. I mean, if you think about the parallel, lucid dreams are this, conscious experience where you're interfacing directly with consciousness with little to zero sensory input. Kind of like how we, create these like, very exotic states, at the Large Hadron Collider using magnets, etc., where we can kind of, create these subatomic, particle collisions and grok, deeper, mysteries in the universe. And so I was like, not only one, do I think it is an extraordinary experience to give, mankind on demand, but that it also could help us, further that answer to that question. Now, in 2018, I had found these two core kind of landmark studies in 2013, 2014, where they had used electrical stimulation to successfully induce lucidity, albeit only statistically significant on two of the kind of the seven variables of kind of that lucidity scale, intuition, the awareness that you're in a dream, and interestingly, disassociation. Now, electrical and electromagnetic as well, stimulation, are kind of what we call internally the vacuum tubes of neurostimulation. Three core kind of limitations. One is depth. Your skull was evolved to keep stuff away from your brain. Getting electricity past your skull is quite difficult. Should you achieve it, what happens is a phenomenon simply called spread. It spreads across the surface of the brain, so there's no precision and no ability to steer that. Now, the reason it was successful at all, right, is it is, again, lucidity is lucid dreaming is REM with the prefrontal cortex activated. So they were clearly stimulating the surface of the prefrontal cortex and having some efficacy. But I was investing in areas of deep technology at the time, and the thing you have to determine with deep tech, right, is this in R or is it in D? Because if it's in R, it's just not what the asset class of venture capital was designed for. It's not really the job of venture capitalists to underwrite research, right? It's more the universities and governments. And I firmly felt it was an R. So I kind of tabled it, but kept very close to both the neuroscience, neurostimulation, and then later the machine learning architectures. And it wasn't until 2022 when I found transcranial focused ultrasound and the neural transformer that I firmly felt we had entered D. Now, let me just talk a little bit in particular about TFUS as it compares to the previous neurostimulation modalities. Back to those three core previous limiting factors: depth is centimeters into the brain non-invasively. Precision is millimeters. So you're going from no precision to millimeters. It's not orders of magnitude. This is a paradigm shift. And then three is the ability to steer these millimeter pulses in a three-dimensional space. This is critical, right? Because your brain fires in three-dimensional neural firing patterns. And so that paired with the neural transformer architecture, which we should definitely dive deeper into, and Wes can go deep on that. He built we built that architecture from the ground up. That those two things paired together were what gave me the confidence that we had firmly entered D and to eventually start the company. And what was amazing is that I found Wes, who was already working on using neural transformers for a variety of different applications in neurotech, and was also just started going down the ultrasound rabbit hole. And so lucky for us to have found each other.
So just one more question on the hardware. When did all of this hardware start to kind of make sense in the package that it does, right? Because I imagine EEGs at one point are very, very big machines. And ultrasound, was something that, you have a doctor who uses it on like a patient for a baby or whatever. It's something you hold in your hand. It's not really like small enough to put, on a headband, right? So when did these pieces of tech get, small enough for this to start to make sense?
Yeah, great question. So, TFUS for neuromodulation actually started around 2004. And through the late kind of mid to late 00s and the 2010s, you just saw, and again, this is really happening in research, institutions, et cetera, where they're increasing both, the element count. So the amount, elements are, piezoelectric material, right? A crystal, for example, where you run electrical current through it and that oscillates, creating the ultrasonic wave. The more elements you have, the more ability you are capable of both moving that around and phasing it, as well as the precision. And we kind of note that there's actually like these curves that we kind of observed. I named it Wes's law because Wes wouldn't is too has too much humility to name it after himself. But you're seeing very similar kind of curves, a la like a Moore's law, where the both the size of the transducers and the number of elements on a given transducer are increasing over time. And so you always want to be in a place, right, in hardware in particular, where where you're riding some kind of curve, right? And so you're seeing that happening in transducers, where both the number of elements, the cost, and so on and so forth are decreasing over time. And so that was a really critical thing that was done over the course of what's now probably 20 years, where you now see this technology really capable of being commercialized.
So increasing resolution is always nice, right? If you get a boost from a tailwind from the increasing resolution. Okay, so let's get to the build out of the neural model. I mean, when we build kind of like machine learning models, we always start with a large messy data set. Hopefully not a small one. So talk about like the first kind of like alpha version of the neural model. Like where did the data come from? What were you trying to do? What was the test that you did that was like, okay, you know what? It's worth putting more time and effort into this.
Yeah. So V1, I'll start with the V1 of Morpheus. What we did is we basically sourced data from open source data sets, alongside some lucid dreaming data from Donders, but primarily the data set surrounds is really built off of what we found open source. And
so maybe just to take a step back, what is the first thing that you're trying to detect there? Are you trying to detect the entry into REM? Is that like, what's the first question that you have that you need to solve? Are you looking at the EEGs and are you trying to, build a classifier to figure out whether it's entering REM? Is that the first thing? Or are you trying to build a classifier to detect the lucidity? What are you trying to detect from that data that you first have?
The goal of Morpheus 1 is to be given a particular brain state and output continuously TFUS instructions to get a response in the brain. That's the number one goal. We're not doing a significant amount of classification. That's the number one goal of the model. The REM stuff, that's, we leave that to other techniques. It's really not something we spend a great deal on. It's really the number one problem is getting some, because that's a solved problem. That's been a problem that's been solved a long time ago.
Right.
The number one thing
you have a bunch of like other tech which basically detects the REM, which gets you into the lucid state, and what you're focused on is like you have a EEG coming in, and you need to produce a target transcranial ultrasound, focus ultrasound kind of like map that your transducers are going to take and implement. Is that an accurate characterization?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So when you start off, do you do the actual work? As in, like, you actually like, okay, I'm going to take this EEG, I'm going to produce a transcranial focus ultrasound, I'm going to actually deploy it, and I'm going to actually do the reading. Did you actually do the data collection, or do you start off with an open source data set, where other people have done it, and you're just kind of like trying to produce the output first? Like, what is the start of this process for you?
Yeah, so the start is that we grab an open source data set that is simultaneous EEG and fMRI. We do a number of pre-processing techniques to fMRI to basically find targets of heightened activity. So, we mask the prefrontal cortex, and we look for what voxels, what 3D pixels exist that are of a heightened state, right? And intuitively, right, that heightened activity is in some way correlated with what's being read in the EEG. So when you have the simultaneous EEG fMRI, what you're able to do is say, okay, at this timestamp, this fMRI scan was ran, and at the same time, this sequence of EEG signals were collected, right? And what you basically say is, well, you feed this to the model, and you basically say, okay, what are the patterns that are existing between this EEG data and the fMRI data, both spatially and temporally? And then from that, you're really approximating something like how do you, what does a model of the prefrontal cortex look like of heightened activity, right? And so the goal being is, well, how do you get a transformer to output instructions to the TFUS to bring the prefrontal cortex into a heightened state? The prefrontal cortex is the key in all of this, right? And if you think of your prefrontal cortex when you were asleep, in a deep sleep, right, everything's slowing down. Activity is very little. But right now, as we're having this conversation, our prefrontal cortexes are quite active. And so the delta between those states, right, is what we attempt to model, and how do you pull someone upward into a heightened state.
Right. So when you have this data set, is it a data set of EEG, fMRI while transcranial ultrasound is being applied? No.
No.
But it is a data set of people experiencing lucidity in dreams.
No.
Yes?
It's someone. It's someone in waking state. Their prefrontal cortex is active, right? And the goal of the transformer is to then model what does that waking state prefrontal cortex look like? Only the prefrontal cortex. And then how do we build a transformer where the TFUS can bring someone to a state where that prefrontal cortex is active?
Right. So what is the second step of the... Yeah.
Let me just jump in for a clarifying point. We are a collaboration with the Donders Institute, which is probably the top lucid dreaming lab in the world. And just led by a gentleman named Dr. Martin Dressler, whose work in 2012, 2014 was critical into establishing the neural correlates of lucid dreaming and so on. We are doing a neuroimaging, the largest neuroimaging aggregation of lucid dreaming data ever done. And we do about 4 of these a week right now. Okay, simultaneous EEG fMRI. We have some data from them, primarily EEG right now. We should be getting our first data set, for example, from them. Wes, you should probably mute just because I think we're in echo. We're getting the first data from them probably maybe today or tomorrow. Actually, I was just on the phone with Dr. Dressler earlier today, and so I want to be clear. What Wes is talking about is like the model that we showcased a couple of weeks ago is trained on open source waking state data, where that prefrontal cortex activation, stimulation can be done. It's also supplemented with EEG data of lucidity. Okay, but the simultaneous EEG fMRI data set, we're only just starting to add into the data set, now in the coming, weeks and months, and we'll continue to add to that. So that was just the one clarifying point that I wanted to make.
No, I mean, and just to be, what I always find is that, whenever we try to implement machine learning or AI, we always end up with insufficient data for the actual thing that we're trying to do, right? And we always end up with like trying to find proxies, because you need like a large amount of data at first to get like some initial result, which allows you to go forward and then obtain like specific data on certain things, right? So I'm just trying to understand, how that worked in the beginning stages, right? Which is where kind of like you need this kind of like initial signal to kind of like, oh, you know what, this is worth our time and effort in order to put something in order to like actually collect like and annotate much more granular and sophisticated data, which is a huge effort on its own, right? So I was just trying to capture how that would have felt like at the early stages of the company, which is obviously you've progressed far beyond that at this stage, right? So you have this kind of like, EEG fMRI data set at the very beginning. You have kind of like the targets that are being generated. And then from those targets, you generate, a transcranial ultrasound kind of map that you need to target, right? And how is that the next step of that is that generation of that, the TFUS map, right? Like the targets are identified in the fMRI, and then you have a build out of your TFUS, and basically that TFUS is basically it's targeting those areas. Is that correct? Is that it's an accurate characterization?
Yeah.
Okay, so and then you have and then you basically have like small pulses that go in, and then you have another EEG reading, right? The next EEG reading comes out, and then you compare, right? And you compare how close you got it to where it needs to go, and then you modify the TFUS again, and then you send in another pulse. Is that accurate?
Yeah. The EEG that is read from the headband prompts the model, and the output is then
So how many times a second are you taking these readings, or what is the kind of like resolution that you have on this? Like, are you taking a reading every like 10 kinds a second, and then the ultrasound is at like 60 hertz, or what are the numbers that we're talking about here?
I mean, the EEG right now samples at 1,000 hertz a second. Do you need all that? Right? You can downsample it. You could do that to reduce complexity if there's a lot of redundancy. So, I mean, it could be anywhere from 256 samples to 1,000, but right now it's 1,000.
Right now it's 1,000, and then the ultrasound is at what kind of frequency are we talking about here?
So, I mean, there's a few different frequencies, right? So there's duty cycle, which is like a proxy for. So there's a few things. So there's the frequency that the ultrasound operates at, call that 500 kilohertz, and then there's the pulses themselves, and our goal is gamma, and so that's probably going to be around 40 pulses per second.
40 pulses per second. So, and each of those 40 pulses could be a different kind of slightly different, as in slightly modified to get you to where you need to go. Is that correct?
Certainly, but I mean, I would say the primary adjustment that's made, per loop cycle is really the spatial targets more than anything. The spatial targets as opposed to the temporal.
I see. So more on like which location in the brain is being targeted rather than the timing. I see. And
yeah, I mean, I think they're both critical, but the spatial is the most important. I put that as a priority.
And that brings the other thing, which is even if the halo is like slightly situated slightly differently, each time, you still kind of like take a reading of the EEG in real time, so you can adjust the spatial targets accordingly. Is that correct?
Yep.
So the next question I have is, how much of it is personalized? Because how much difference is there from person to person that you have to adjust for, that the device or the model has to adjust for in real time?
Yeah. So the next big thing that we're working on right now is the reinforcement learning layer of all of this. So, there's two types of feedback that the model will receive, right? It's the user explicit feedback. The user, for example, even if they're awake, they run a sequence and they give some feedback, like I didn't feel anything, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, or I felt something very significant, so on and so forth. They've explicitly, ranked, a given sequence, or they've explicitly ranked an experience, and that they woke up and that they've given feedback. So that's number one, right? Number two is the neurofeedback, right? What are the sequences, given the TFUS pulses? What is the response in the brain? there's a number of ways to measure it, but you can sort of think of it like, you're sort of pinging the brain and you're sort of listening to the responses, right? And so, spikes in gamma, general patterns between the different electrode placements, that's really informative for the model, because what then you can then do is measure on a continuous scale, what is working, right? You can do sort of binary classification in terms of like, did this work or didn't work on user feedback? But you can take this sort of continuous feedback and provide that as either rewards or penalties to the given sequences that the user experienced, and then from that learn what's sort of hitting with a particular person. In a similar way, you can think of a TikTok feed or Twitter feed. As the user gives feedback, both maybe explicitly in the form of a like, or maybe it's some sort of continuous factor in like the time that they viewed a particular tweet or video, the model can then learn what are the preferences, or what are sort of the things that in terms of content, which are just tokens that work with a particular person, and then from that the model will learn over time.
Let me just because I always like to I let Wes give the super technical version, but I know you have a very informed audience. But just in the sense for layman, a layman explanation, right? First of all, we only focus on training models on brain states that are both discrete and universal. To define terms, when I say discrete, I mean it is one thing and not another. A counterexample being, for example, unfortunately, flow states, right? So flow states are not discrete. You can be a surfer and enter a state of flow, and what triggered that is your kind of motor cortex, right? Versus a chess player can enter a state of flow, and it's like their spatial reasoning. So you would just need more data to create a generalized model. But the way that a lucid dreaming is discrete and universal. It is prefrontal cortex activation during REM, whether you're in a lucid dream or Wes is in a lucid dream or I'm in a lucid dream, which makes it easier to make these generalizable models. And also I should mention, we should mention, what we already just did in terms of, the sampling rate of EEG, but for these data sets, these simultaneous EEG fMRI data sets, they're extraordinarily information dense, right? 1,000, to give you a sense, a spatial reading in fMRI once every 2.1 seconds. In that same period, you'll have 2,100 EEG samplings. So it's extremely information dense. And so broadly, how you could think about this is you're creating this kind of vector space of possible lucid dreaming sequences, right? And so on and so forth. But you might be over here, and your reinforcement learning will drive the model to really focus on targets around here, whereas Wes or I might be in other areas in that space. So that's just the important kind of, layman explanation that I would give.
Oh, absolutely. How much, let's say you have, what is your target for the first run of the Halo? Is it 10,000 devices? Is it more? What is your rough number that you're coming up with?
Yeah. We have a reservation program that I started because I talked to a lot of consumer hardware founders, and they said, listen, one, obviously de-risk demand, but also for go-to manufacturing motion, it's really great if you have an order book that you can kind of use to approach better manufacturing partners, because the bane of all consumer hardware companies, and really hardware companies broadly, but particularly consumer hardware companies, is these small batch, medium batch manufacturers who you order 1,000, 500 of them don't work. You're hey, these don't work. And they're cool, send us more money. Now 250 of them don't work, etc. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so, we've done, $2.4 million of booked revenue through that reservation program. I want to be very clear. That money's held in a separate bank account. We do not use it for development. It's fully refundable at any time. But it's, I think it shows a good sense of demand. I think in terms of, what we want, the first run to look like, it's very much going to be reflective of where that reservation list is at the time. Certainly anyone who puts down a reservation should be getting a device, because they took a bet on us when, in some of these cases, when we were nothing but a website and a dream, not to be too, on the nose. But that's really, the critical thing is, building out this reservation program. We spent $0 on marketing so far. And so, I think what this shows, right, is there's enormous demand for this. We have to make it work. Once we start, we're starting neurostimulation, in the spring. We have a beta user program that we launched alongside showcasing the model. We got like 3,500 people to sign up for that, in 5 days or something like that. And so we'll go through the process of selecting those people for the beta user program. But anyway, in terms of, what the initial run will look like, it'll be very dependent on, that reservation list.
I mean, I just wanted to draw like a metaphor. Like, let's say you had like, I'm just going to put a number, like, let's say 10K, right? Let's say you have 10K, and how much would that expand your, because I imagine like you can use the EEG data coming out to kind of improve your models, right? So how does that model feedback look like from the initial devices? Like, if you have like, let's say 10,000 devices, because, and I see this all the time, like, there's this graph that people have of, the day the iPhone, went out, and like 10 years later, we probably create as many photos in a day as like the entire history of humanity before the iPhone, right? Like every single day, there's probably more photos are taken than the entire history of humanity before the iPhone, right? And so I wonder if putting this device out there expands the data set of EEGs so dramatically, so dramatically, that you can have this enormously larger data set. What would having 10,000 of these devices in the market, do you think that would expand your data set significantly for future, improvement?
Yeah. So that goes back to the reinforcement layer that really only works at scale, or it works significantly better at scale, I should say, right? Because the Halo is a neural imaging device, right? It's a neurostimulation device, but it's and so what we're able to do is look at, basically what are the responses you're getting from this TFUS, and those responses are measured with EEG, and that's really informative, right? You can learn quite a bit from what works and what doesn't. And so while I think that the starting with this open source data set, this simultaneous EEG and fMRI, we can get terabytes of data that way. But it's really when you talk into hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data, that's really going to come from that people are using this every night, and we're collecting, just on a nightly basis, gigabytes worth of neural imaging data, and the responses specifically, from TFUS sequences, right? You're pinging the brain, and you're basically seeing how it's reverberating, and we're collecting that, and it's this continuous thing over and over again. So it would be a very significant amount of data.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And one thing I also want to talk about is not only scaling up the reinforcement side, but also the initial training data aggregation. So, the day after we showcased the model, we released a piece that I think we had a good response from it, but I don't think people really realize like how profound it potentially is. We call it the Qualia Factory. Realistically, that's a really cool marketing name for what is a neuroimaging lab, primarily set up with this simultaneous EEG fMRI, neuroimaging data setups. And so, you can imagine, right, where we can actually expand also our training data set, where, we bring in people who are, extraordinary at, whether it's lucid dreaming or meditating or focus or positive mood, etc. The entire state space of, potentially discrete universal, but even potentially, because we have the scale now, non-discrete, universal brain states, and aggregating more and more of this data to train successive models, where you're creating models that can do more and more different experiences with the same piece of hardware. We do aim to hopefully launch the device with more than just lucid dreaming as an experience, definitely focus and hopefully also positive mood. So that's also a really critical way you scale up data, is on the training data sets, using this Qualia Factory, which is really a larger neuroimaging lab built for purpose.
So let me maybe I kind of missed that earlier. So your the core thing that you're looking at is kind of like, as you on your project roadmap is discrete universal states, as you call them. And of the, again, I think, perhaps not everyone is super familiar, but like, of the discrete universal states, you're saying focus is one of them, and positive mindset is another. Is that positive mood? Is that another?
Mood, yeah. So TFUS has already been used
mood
to induce focus and positive mood. So these things have already been, validated in the context of utilization with TFUS to do it. So in many ways, we're also just broadly recreating that. But yeah, I mean, listen, we think that lucid dreaming is the killer app for this technology from a consumer experience perspective. It is the kind of the most profound, extraordinary experience that we think we can give, and so that's why it's our focus. But you want to create a system, right, where over time you can make a more and more generalized device where the number of experiences the same device can give you increases over time. So we want to aim to have kind of three core experiences. Release when the device ships. It obviously also increases the TAM of the device. People like to be focused when they do work. So maybe you can wear it while you're jamming out a spreadsheet or something. I don't know, whatever you're doing for work. So in positive mood, people want to feel happy for and so on. So that's kind of the impetus for that's really critical about the model. Not only does it obviously create these this closed loop system that creates these targets and reliably creates these experiences, but also allows you to onboard more experiences to the system over time.
So let's go back to lucid dreaming, Rin. Let's say you have a device. Now, if you had to like create a tutorial, because some people are just like, they don't know what to do with it, right? So if you had a tutorial or something that you'd need to create for someone, is there like a series of exercises that you'd recommend? Like in the first one, wake up, take a look around, walk around, try this, right? Like, is there like what would tutorial 1, tutorial 2 look like?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, it is very critical and incumbent upon us to do a certain level of consumer education, before they try this out, and give them a guide to kind of the initial things that maybe they can try out doing. Certainly, number one, right, is just taking in and grokking your environment and trying to, maybe even depending on where you are, if there's a dream character, around you, go talk to them, right? Go ask them questions and so on and so forth. These set of questions. Maybe try to make a flower appear out of the ground or a building appear out of the ground. Change your environment. The thing that's also really important is, like, again, the way that this is experienced phenomenologically is what you imagine becomes. So I think maybe also one of the things to do is to also like go into it and say, where do you want to be? What is the first environment you want to create, and so that when you're lucid, you can do that. But yeah, it is definitely important that we create some kind of content and guide that does that, as well as prepare you for what that's going to feel like, right? It's going to be a wild experience the first time, no doubt about it. I think people equilibrate to things like very quickly. We already saw that in the context, right, of ChatGPT, where it's like that was like one of the most extraordinary things ever. And now it's a completely, banal. I think, you're absolutely correct that, we'll have a set of content that kind of walks you through what this is going to feel like, what maybe to do when you first experience it. But I frankly think that people will very, very quickly become attuned and accustomed to what they can do in these experiences very quickly.
So let me just playing around with this idea. Let's say you put on the halo and you fire it up, you go to sleep. You also have maybe an app that talks you through it, or basically runs like a vocal experience, right? Like something that once the lucid state is triggered, says like, hello, blah, 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 wake up, do this, or or, or imagine you're doing this, or et cetera, et cetera. Like, because I read through some of the research that you had on your page, that's like a real-time dialogue between experimenters and dreamers. So it seems like you can have like conversation, you can have like a little bit of like, interaction. So would that be something that you have a little bit of interactivity, like a vocal kind of experience where someone is talking you through something or someone is doing something with you together? Is that something that you guys have experimented with in the lab? Like, have you tried that?
Yeah, so the problem with that, right, is when you provide sensory input, your sensory, the worry there is that you could activate the thalamus, which regulates sleep, and that you would just wake them up. And so, I mean, it's interesting. We talked to a guy who did his PhD on attempting auditory induction, and he had to do this whole thing where, I mean, and it was a very limited data set where he basically created this algorithm that determined people's different kind of waking thresholds. And so, the term like you're a light sleeper or heavy sleeper, it's kind of like how much auditory noise can you have until you like are actually like awoken? Because the problem there, right, is like when your brain hears something, or people have tried to use light to induce lucidity. If it thinks it's seeing something or something's changing in the environment outside of you, your body's like, holy shit, something's happening. We have to wake up. So I think an auditory guide is really not something that you want to do, because you very much increase the chances that you wake them up. And again, I think content, providing people like a walkthrough content, could be video content and so on and so forth, that walks them through what they will expect and so on and so forth. I really think people equilibrate to things very, very, very quickly, and so once you're like attuned and accustomed to this, there is no need for like this guide. Like, you just know that like what you imagine becomes, right? And so people have their imagination.
Music. Playing music in the background, is that the same? Is that basically the same? Because or does that
Again,
get tuned out by the brain? You're just
again, no. The issue is that when you send sensory data, whether it's through your ears or your nose or your eyes, you can activate the thalamus, which regulates sleep and wakes somebody up.
Wow, interesting. So basically, you allow yourself to experience the dream in fullness without distracting yourself with things outside it. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point, right, is that we want to circumvent like these auditory or sensory, data inputs, and we're just focused on activating the prefrontal cortex.
Right on. Tell me something a little bit more about the qualia factory, right? Because I guess my layperson's kind of like understanding of qualia is like your subjective experience of consciousness. I don't know if that's an accurate description. What is qualia, and why would you say that you have some potential to create a qualia effect?
Yeah, so again, I'll define qualia, but I want to be clear. Qualia factory is kind of a marketing term. What we're talking about, right, is a neuroimaging lab that is specifically set up to do simultaneous EEG and fMRI neuroimaging, so that we can build more training data sets for more models that give more experiences. Qualia, which Charles Peirce, a famous American philosopher, kind of a contemporary of William James and so on, or created this term quale, which was kind of, and qualia being kind of the unit economic of a given conscious experience. So the color red, the smell of coffee, etc. These are units of qualia or conscious experience, and a conscious experience, right, is the composition of that entire qualia landscape. So that's where it comes from, and that's why we kind of named it that.
I see. Very good. The one thing that I think people can ask about is that, is this a medical device? Is this FDA regulated? Should it be FDA regulated? Describe to me the thought process behind should it be regulated or not? Why is it not regulated, etc.?
Sure. We don't make medical claims. That's very important. Two is, the threshold of regulation for, ultrasound is 720 milliwatts per centimeter cubed. It's essentially the the pressure that's being exerted from the stimulation. We're talking about something that's between 100 to 200 milliwatts per centimeter cubed, so well below that threshold. And also to give you a sense, you can get recreational electrical stimulation devices today from companies like Lifted, et cetera. And that's, I think, if you look at like it's a far less precise, technology, et cetera, which, and so like the safety record of ultrasound relative to any of these other technologies is, far better. So, I mean, to give you maybe even in a phrase, it's less than a sonogram on a mother's womb. That's what we're talking about. So it's not regulated. We're not, one of the key differences between us and a lot of the, people in the TFUS space, they're almost universally, targeting medical applications, which is great. It just means that, right, the time to market is much longer. And so we focus on these recreational consumer experiences. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the framework and why we don't have to go through it. Yeah.
Interesting. So, there are people trying to use transcranial focus ultrasound for medical applications, but you are not actually doing any medical claims, medical devices. You're not going to cure anyone. It is just a state of lucid dreaming, and that's all you're trying to do at this point. And the amount of ultrasound which is being projected into the brain is something like 1/7 the regulated limit, right? Like 1/7, 1/8 of the regulated limit, something like that.
Yeah, 1/7, 1/5, or something like that. Yeah, between 1/7.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, very big. So, what does Morpheus look like? What does V2 of the device look like? We have a V1. It's coming out soon. It's in beta. You have beta testers coming in. Is a V2 basically going to be kind of better and smaller, like more transducers? And obviously, you can upgrade your model. You can update your model anytime on the back end. But if we have a V2 device, are you looking for further development and miniaturization of the transducers of the EEG? Are you looking for more resolution? Are you looking to pack more of them in a smaller device? What would you look for before you pull the trigger on a V2 in the hard way?
Sure. We are very dead set and focused on V1, as you can imagine. I mean, we're migrating the model in the technical prototype. We have to do actually. I know you probably can see some of my team building a 3D scan line tank for a hydrophone, where we use it to test the pressure and so on and so forth, and compare that to simulation, ultrasound simulation that we run to basically calibrate it. But so we're very focused on that. But in terms of what a V2, where the improvements would be, I'll again reference that Wes's law that I talked about previously, where you're seeing an increased level of both miniaturization, the number of elements on a given transducer, which will increase your precision and ability to phase and steer it. And as you mentioned, the model will continuously update, and in the background, we will launch more and more experiences which you can subscribe to, and improve the number of experiences that way as well. And so both the number of experiences can be improved by the transducers, both the number of the transducers or the number of elements on a transducer, as well as from the model. So you definitely want to improve things like that, as well as improving the energy consumption of the transducers, so that you can shrink. Hopefully and some of the electronics where you don't need kind of a side totem gear, and hopefully maybe whether it's V2 or V3, that stuff is just in the headband and so on. So that's how you could kind of see this improving over time, as successive models are produced. But we are hyper focused on just getting V1 done.
What have been the biggest challenges for the hardware? Is it heat? Is it power? Like what is the thing that has been challenging the most in the last build out while you've been building this?
Yeah, I think one of the a few things. One is we did this. We did our prototype with Card 79, who did they did Neuralink for Elon when and they work with a number of other neurotech companies. I'm not sure I can mention their names. But things like comfort is really critical, right? Because you have to be able to fall asleep with this on, or if you're using it for a waking state experience, like it's got to be comfortable. So like just design and form factor is very, very, very important in terms of the hardware. And so we did, excessive, studies on, okay, like if you, some people sleep on their side, some people sleep on their stomach, some people sleep on their other side or their back, making sure that it's, fully comfortable and you can fit all the components into that comfortable form factor. And then in terms of like more like brass tacks, right, there's component selection, et cetera, which you have to be very, focused on. And then, there's all this equipment that we have to build, like this, 3D scan line hydrophone tank, to actually like, tests, et cetera, and simulation software so that you can kind of, because we can't see I can't see how this is, the waves are propagating in your skull. I'd have to cut you open and I don't want to do that to you. So, we have to create, we have to use this, this hydrophone and the simulation software to create this one-to-one, correlation where we can, then be able to take, somebody's skull and understand how it's going to propagate through their head. So I think there's a lot of stuff that you just have to build out in order to even, get to neuromodulation, which has really been a focus, in the last couple of months. But yeah, come spring, we're going to be, doing neurostimulation and validating all these, experiences and, hopefully having, in short order, but you never know, the first ultrasonically induced lucid dream.
Right. In the early days, was there like any like hurdles where you needed like experimental data to decide whether or not this was a go or not? Like, were there like any like you were like, hey, we need to figure out this, and if this is not gonna happen, then we need to pivot, right? Like, what were were there any moments or were there anything technically or otherwise that you saw you needed to have those decisions?
Yeah. So again, I mean, comparing 2018 when I first thought about doing this to 2022 when I found TFUS, you needed a different neurostimulation modality than electricity or electromagnetism. And then on TFUS has already been used to induce focus, positive mood, deep meditative states, etc. It is neuromodulatory generally, and so as long as you understand right the brain state that you are trying to induce. It is definitely, this is the integrated circuit for non-invasive neurostimulation aid. So, that was, I think from our side, very de-risked. And then we have this collaboration with the Donders Institute, for neuroimaging data. And so that was also very critical that we needed that pipeline. And then having successive, breakthroughs or acquisition to data sets that we could use to supplement that data as well as and expand our data pipeline. But really it was that, and of course just the advent of the neural transformer architecture in 2022, which then Wes expanded and built from the ground up to be a multimodal neural transformer. But the go in terms of red light green light was I think really on the neurostimulation front more than anything else, the modality.
Right. Do you sometimes come across purists who are like, lucid dreaming is something that you should naturally come to as a part of like a kind of like religious or semi-religious meditative process, rather than something that is to be offered free to everyone? Do you come across those kinds of people? Do you come across comments like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a couple of comments, on some of the, the various things that we posted. I think, you see kind of like gatekeeping in like everything, basically everything. And I think, yeah, I mean, I also, was in the psychedelic space for a brief while, and you kind of saw the same thing in the psychedelic space where you had either like these ethnobotanists kind of, these are sacred, sacred plants and compounds. And then you had like, the scientists at University College London and Johns Hopkins, et cetera, who are really trying to move things in our understanding forward. And so I think you see these dynamics play out across many different areas. But I think it's kind of like if, we said, again, maybe bring it back to like, the fire. It's like, no, like only lightning gets to create fire or or something like that. We shouldn't control it. What we could burn down our village, or somebody could burn down our village, And so, I fully expected, and I'm not surprised that we got, that kind of, feedback from certain people. But frankly, like, the world has moved forward by people who kind of say, this is an extraordinary, powerful thing. What if we gave it to everyone?
Right. And on that note, in your early kind of like testers who were testing with you in the lab, is there anyone like what has been like a kind of remarkable experience when someone has tried this on and they've come to you and like this is a whoa moment for them? Like what like I'm sure someone has tested it and
To be very clear, we're starting neurostimulation in the spring. We have to migrate the model on and again, as I mentioned, test out all the hardware to make sure that and get it in correspondence with the simulation software so that we're doing this properly. But we have friends at places like the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Study that's been running a number of different ultrasound experiences. I think meditation and positive mood, I think, were the things that they were doing, as well as maybe some others. And there's actually a really great blog post that somebody wrote on his experience, and it's pretty extraordinary. There's also a really great video that was done, quite some time ago on the research of a gentleman named Dr. Jason Gwetty, where he was using it to induce deep meditative states. It's like they use this woman who had never meditated a day in her life and induced a deep meditative state. She's very emotional about it. It's an extraordinary thing to be dropped into a brain state that you've never experienced before. So it is a very powerful, technology and experience. We look forward to be giving, those experiences to our beta users in the spring.
That's amazing, man. I am so inspired. This is such an awesome, awesome piece of technology, because you often read, let's say a Hermann Hesse or Siddhartha or a lot of these things, and you wonder, actually they're not able to fully describe their experience, right? It is not possible for anyone to fully verbally describe this kind of altered or different state of consciousness. And we have these kind of like very, very limited understanding and limited ability to describe what's happening in our heads. And to the extent that, there is something that you can experience which you have not been able to experience. It's inside you, but you can't really experience it. And to the extent that you can use a technological, innovation to kind of like trigger that and learn something more about yourself. I mean, that's amazing, right? It's absolutely fantastic. So.
No, yeah. Obviously, I think we share your enthusiasm. I think the best thing that you can do for people is give them the experience. If you can give them experience, it's empirical for them, innately. And I think one of the things that's going to be pretty extraordinary is, over the years and decades as we have this technology, I to paraphrase Altman, right? It's like this is the worst these neurotransformers will ever be. This is the worst TFUS will ever be. And so if we can build, on these, both on, on these, these, curves like West's law and on top of, machine learning improvements that we're seeing all, every day, the ability to give people a device that allows them to explore the state space of conscious experience is going to be transformative for the world. I frankly don't really have a good sense of what the world looks like when this is available en masse. But it is an exciting world. It is certainly a strange one, but it is, I think, one that is, profound and something that I look forward to exploring alongside everyone else.
Awesome. So I think thank you, Eric. Thank you, Wes. Thank you for your time today. Emergent Behavior is a part of the Turpentine Network. For our full newsletter, visit emergentbehavior.co. For more Turpentine podcasts and sponsorship inquiries, visit turpentine.co.